So this is module 1 of the DBXL training, and our goal in this module is to take a form and integrate it with DBXL. So this is a form that perhaps you have designed. It's not currently deployed anywhere, it's not in production, it's not in use, and you want to integrate it with DBXL. And we are starting off with the expense report sample form that shipped with InfoPath 2007. So it's fairly simple, but the good thing about this form is that it's already built for us, so we don't have to worry about building the form or worrying about the schema. The other benefit about this form is that it contains repeating data right here in the item section. So this is going to be useful when we get to reporting, when we get to SQL mapping. If you have a form that you want to try this out with, if you want to start with a new form, a blank new form, it doesn't have to be the expense report. Feel free to use a form of your choosing, but I will be demonstrating the steps using this form. Before we jump into the form, however, I would like to make sure that we are all DBXL administrators. So to perform all of the steps that we will be doing, we will need to be DBXL administrators. The way to do that is to remote desktop into the server where we have installed DBXL. And you don't have access to do this, so this first portion is just a demo of how to do this. You don't have access to our server, obviously. But you can perform the same steps on your own server, of course. Oh, it's because I'm not connected. Okay, so this is the server where DBXL was installed for the training session. What we're going to do is we're going to find the Qdabra Web Service folder. On a typical installation, so that means that there's SharePoint involved in the equation, you're going to find the Qdabra Web Service folder by navigating into the inetpub folder, www root, WSS, virtual directories 80, Qdabra Web Service. And then within the Qdabra Web Service, you're going to find a web.config file. We're going to open that with a notepad. Any text editor is fine. This file gets created when DBXL is installed. A lot of the information that you put into the DBXL installer can be found here and can be modified here. So, for example, you probably, when you install DBXL, you probably remember having to provide a SQL instance. So that's the SQL instance. And you probably remember having to provide a name for the database. So here are the names for the database. So that's just an example of how the data you input into the installer has made it into the web config. What we're looking for, however, is this section right here, and specifically these 5 lines. These are permissions. If you have installed DBXL and if you have gone through the DBXL installation document, you see that we recommend accepting the defaults on that screen when you install. And what you're seeing right now is the default, right? So DBXL, when it installs, it creates a DBXL admin group on the local machine, and it grants all authenticated users this browser group alias. Browser group alias means that you are able to open a form. That's all it means. You can just open a form that is stored in DBXL, and that's it. If you have writer permission, then you can submit. If you have reader permission, then you can read. So browser group alias just gives you the opportunity to open a blank XSN, right? Just the blank form with no data submitted. So the two keys that we're concerned with right now for the purposes of this training module are the DBXL Administrator keys, which are these two. So you'll see that these are defined as a local group called DBXL Admins. So let's find that group. So I typically go to Computer Management and then Local Users and Groups. So here is the DBXL Admins group. And this is the group that tells you who is a DBXL Administrator. Simple as that. So if you need to add yourself, if you need to add someone, you can do so here. Now you'll see that there are some individual users here. I'm going to take the chance to just remove a couple of people just to show off what can be done. You'll see that I am added here. You'll see Marcy is here, and you'll see that there's a group here at the bottom called Training Class. So that's a group. So that's you. So all those users, Time, Basil, Mint, all those users are contained within the training class. So you can add an individual or you can add a group. So now that we have ensured that we are all members of the DBXL Admins group, we can proceed with the training. So we know that we're not going to face any sort of permissions issues. We're not going to need this for now, so I'm going to exit this. Okay, so we're back to the form. There's another component. There's another component that we need to address, though, and that is when we go to this Qdabra Web Service page, we're going to be opening the DBXL Administration tool. We're going to be opening this DAT numerous times this week during the training. One of the keys here before we get started is to make sure that this site is added to our local intranet settings. So the way to do this is to go to the Tools, Internet Options, and then Security. And we have all these different zones. What we want is local intranet. So then you click on Sites and Advanced, and here you have a list of the sites that are considered a part of your local intranet. You'll see that I have a lot of websites added here, and I'll just scroll down to show you the training website. So I encourage you to do this before you try to open DAT, otherwise you're going to get an error. And the reason you're going to get the error is because a DAT is an InfoPath form that contains code, and in order for that code to execute, there has to be a certain security configured, right, to allow that code to execute. So if the website is not in local intranet, that code is going to fail to execute, and DAT is not going to open. And just to make sure to mention this, trusted sites is not enough. It's not the right security level for this. Local intranet will do the trick. Okay, so now that our prerequisites are fulfilled, let's modify the form to make sure that it submits to DBXL. All we have to do is add a data connection. So we go to Data, Data Connections, and we see that the InfoPath form, as it is shipped by Microsoft, includes a email submit data connection. We don't want to do that, so we'll just remove that, and we'll add our own. So we're going to create a new data connection to submit data to a web service. And this web service, well, how do we know what the web service is? As you grow familiar with DBXL and as you work more with DBXL, you're going to be able to just type it in here. you're going to memorize it. But if you're starting out with DBXL, then what I would recommend is that you return to this default page. And if you scroll down, you're going to see a list of web services. And the web service we want to use is the document service right here, the first one. So if we click on that, you see a list of methods of operations that are supported. And if we look carefully, there is a submit document operation. So that's where we're headed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this URL so I don't have to type it in, and I'm going to paste it in here. And like I said, eventually after you do this enough times, you're just going to type it in automatically. It's going to become second nature, but it's always good to know that this page has a reference for all the web service links. You can click next. It's going to contact the server. DBXL is going to respond with a list of operations, same list of operations that we see here. It's going to be displayed in the next screen of the data connection wizard. And I'm being prompted. Okay. So we find submit document from the list, and it has a description of the operation. If you select any one of these, you'll get all the descriptions. For now, we're using submit document, so let's just keep things simple for now. Let's select submit document and click next. And this is the parameter screen. So we have to be we have to take some time here to explain what each of these parameters are going to do for you. The first parameter is doc type name. Document type is the name of the configuration that we're going to set up in DBXL. Now, in the scenarios that we're going to be covering on today, tomorrow, and Thursday, the document type name is automatically detected. So DBXL tries to automatically detect the doc type name. It may fail, and it does fail on some scenarios. So this parameter is here specifically for those scenarios where DBXL might fail. One of those scenarios we're going to cover on Friday. So on Friday, when we get to the screen, you're going to see me set up a doc type name. For now, I'm going to leave it blank, and I'm going to let DBXL automatically detect that. The second parameter is XML. XML simply means the entire XML document that we are submitting. So we're going to select entire form, and we're going to check submit data string. Now there are three parameters here that I want to treat as a group: name, author, and description. Name, author, and description can be thought of as promoted properties. So let's say that you've worked with SharePoint before and you have published an InfoPath form to a SharePoint form library. You know that you can define promoted properties, and those promoted properties become columns in your SharePoint form library. The name, author, and description are the columns that are displayed in DBXL. So why is it important to define these? It's important because if you're the administrator and you have users submitting forms and a user contacts you and says, hey, I made a mistake and I need to delete a specific form. If you know the name, if you know the author, if you know the description, it's going to be a little bit easier to find that document among the list and make sure that you are modifying or deleting the correct item. So that's why it's important to define these correctly. And I'm not looking at the step-by-step in the module, so I'm going to define these. I might define these differently than in the module, but that's okay. There's no requirement here. You're just defining these however it best fits you.
So let's say that for name, I want to use the report date. And for all three of these, you want to make sure to check submit data string. For author, let's say I select the employee name. And for description, I'm going to select the purpose. So you see that for all three, I checked submit data as string. There are a couple of more parameters down here. Well, one more, allow overwrite. Like I said about doc type name, doc type name is automatically detected in most scenarios. Allow override is not necessary in 99% of the scenarios. There are some corner cases where this parameter has become necessary, so that's why it's there. But you should not need to interact with it, at least that I know of, unless you get to one of these corner cases, in which case you can just contact us and we'll help you out. So once my parameters are all defined, I can click Next, and I will give this a better name. I will call it DBXL Submit, and I will leave it checked as the default submit connection. And that's it. I have created my data connection that submits to DBXL. Now I need to make sure that my form uses that. So I will scroll down and I will find that there's a submit button. Now that submit button doesn't do anything right now. So we have to configure it. I'll go to submit options, and it looks like InfoPath was smart enough to hook this up for us. So you basically want to make sure that allow users to submit this form is checked, that you are sending form data to a web service, and that you're using the DBXL Submit data connection that was just created. You can show the submit button in the ribbon if you would like. I'm going to choose not to. And you can show a message if the form submission fails. You can show a message if the form was submitted successfully. And then after submit, you can close the form. So this is the most basic scenario that we can set up. We've modified the form so that it submits to DBXL. We made sure that the submit button is hooked up to perform that submit. And our next step is to save the form. So I will go to File, Save, and I'm just saving this to my desktop. So let's call this Lab 1 End. And I will close InfoPath because I'm done with the designer. I have finished here. And I will return to my default page for DBXL. And as I mentioned earlier, this very first link is your DBXL Administration tool. We're going to be clicking this quite often. So let's click it now for the first time. You're going to get this bar that says Open, Save, Cancel. You want to open. So this is going to open the DBXL Administration tool. You will hear us refer to this as DAT for short. So if you hear DAT, this is what we're talking about. It's the administration tool. And there's a load of things we can do here. For example, we could check out the license. And we have made sure that there's a license here that should be enough for all of our training modules this week. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to set up a new configuration. So this takes us to a blank document type where we can first attach our form. So this is the form that we saved. We can attach that. And we can give this document type a name. The name is tricky business when we're doing this training, so what I will encourage you to do is to use a name that is unique. If we all call this expense report, we're going to run into trouble because we're all going to be trying to save a form by the same name. So I will call this expense report, but I will underscore it with my name at the end, just to make sure that it's distinguishable from any others that get created in here. Once that's done, I'm going to save. I'm going to get a confirmation message. I'm also going to see here that there's a last modified by, there's a last modified date, there's a form version, there's a direct URL to the form template, there's an open link. So DBXL, once you save this, DBXL starts to build this configuration. Let me take you back to the catalog so you see where that is. So it's right here. If you wanted to add a description, let's do that. This is the I'll save that, and then once we return to the catalog, you will see that description. So these are just some optional items that we can add here, just so you have a description of what these are, so you can visually identify your forms. The other thing we can do here is we can group these document types. So I'm just going to group these under my name and save. So now once I return to the catalog, I'm going to see that there's a group with my name, and I can expand that group, and it's going to have my form, and there's my description. So these are just some tricks to help you better manage DBXL. If you get to the point where you have 50 forms stored here, it might be a good idea to start creating these groups and make things a little bit more easier to manage. So we have set up our form, we have set up our document type. It's time to test it. So to test it, we're going to simply click this open link. It's going to ask us to open this form. And for now, we're doing this in the InfoPath client, the InfoPath filler. Tomorrow, we will move into the browser, into a browser form. So for today, it's in client. Tomorrow, we'll do browser. So we let that load, and we get our form. We can enter our data, and I'm just going to submit some very basic data, just so we can submit this form. Let's say I have 2 items. And I'll add a cost for each of these. And I'll submit. So the form is going to submit to DBXL. If I refresh, I'm going to find that there's a 1 document stored now. So you see there's a 1 here. And if I click on that 1, it's actually going to take me directly to the list of documents. So this table shows your list of documents that belong to this document type. And you see that the name, author, and description are defined according to the parameters set up in the data connection wizard. The name was the expense date, the author is my name, and the description is the purpose. I can open that. Once it opens, I'm going to see the data that I had already submitted. There it is. Let's say that so I forgot my email. So that's a valid point. I forgot my email. So let's fill that out. And I can resubmit. So when we resubmit, the this same form is going to get overwritten. So if I click refresh, you're going to see that there's still only one document. The difference here is that the version number increased to 2. So that's telling you that this form was submitted, that created version 1, then it was open and modified, that created version 2. Okay. There are 2 more things in this table that we haven't talked about. Those are the first 2 columns, doc ID and ref ID. So I want to pause to talk about those. The doc ID column is a number that is assigned incrementally across your installation of DBXL. So it starts off at 1 and it just keeps incrementing each time a form is submitted. So if somebody else right now is creating another document type and submits, you're probably going to get doc ID 210. And then the next submission after that is going to be 211. Even if it's in different forms, that number just keeps incrementing. The ref ID, on the other hand, only increments for this form. So the ref ID for this first document is obviously 1. And if I click New, and I submit a new form, and I'll just keep this to a minimum because I want to just illustrate this point. So once this form is submitted, you're going to see that the ref ID for this new one is 2. And if we submit the next one, it's going to be 3. So ref ID counts for your form. It's an auto increment count for your form. Doc ID is for the entire installation of DBXL. Okay. A couple more things here in the query documents section. Let's say that you have pages and pages of documents here. So we have paging here, previous and next. We have a query all button, which I don't recommend clicking because if you have many documents, thousands of documents, it's going to try to query them all, and it's going to be slow. So it's not very efficient. But if you know the starting doc ID, you can just type that in there and you can click query and it's going to find that doc ID for you. So see here, when I click query all, it warns me this is going to take a long time. This could take a long time. You can also query by the ref ID. So if I just type in a ref ID here of 2 and query, yeah, I can query for my documents. And then like I said, you can use previous and next. And the typical paging is 20 items per page. So that's a fairly good number as far as performance is concerned. Let's say that I want to delete document 210 because it doesn't have enough data. Doesn't have the data that's required. It's a test document. For whatever reason you want to delete it, you just check this checkbox to the right of it and you click delete, and it's going to be irretrievably deleted. Let's say that you need to provide your users for a link with a link to submit this form, and you don't want to give them access to DBXL. You just give them access to this URL. And if I you just paste that into an email, or you put it into a Word document, right, with a link, or wherever you want to share this link, users can access the form. So that wraps up Module 1 for this training session.